Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Tonight we are diving into part 2, chapter 13 in the Book of Jubilees. Let's get started.
All right, guys, we're in chapter 13. We're going to begin in verse 17. It says, in the 4th year of this week, Lot parted from him, and Lot dwelt in Sodom, and the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. And it grieved him in his heart that his brother's son had parted from him, for he had no children. In that year when Lot was taken captive, Yahuwah said unto Abram, after that Lot had parted from him, in the 4th year of this week, lift up thine eyes from the place where thou art dwelling, northward, and southward, and westward, and eastward. For all the land which thou seest I shall give to thee, and to thy seed forever, and I shall make thy seed as the sand of the sea, though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet thy seed shall not be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and the breadth of it, and see it all, for to thy seed shall I give it. And Abram went to Hebron and dwelt there. So it's obvious, as we read in the Bible, and it talks about this point here in Abram's pilgrimage, that when Lot leaves him, what we get a little bit more, sometimes this is where Jubilees doesn't quite give us as much information, where, the Old Testament will. So in here we realize in the Old Testament it talks about Lot, and when Lot left Abram, that he actually pitched his tent outside of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think it's like a chapter later, if my memory's correct, or so, that he goes from being outside of Sodom and Gomorrah, that then all of a sudden we find him inside. And not only is he inside, but he's actually in a place of position of authority at the gate and yada yada. And so there's a little bit more information that we can get out of that from the Bible itself. And it's interesting that the what do you call it? The reputation of Sodom and Gomorrah went before them. Mm-hmm. That this was definitely a place of exceedingly wickedness of it. Or it says here, the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. And so this is interesting that Lot, when he leaves Abram, and he goes in this direction, because in the Bible, what we're given is Lot says, or Abram says to Lot, hey, pick a side. Which side you want? And it's just interesting that maybe we're seeing a little bit more of the heart of Lot to say, well, if you're asking, I guess I'll take this over here. I'm going to go this direction. And so I think there was something that might have been intriguing to him about Sodom and Gomorrah, to where later on in the story we find him, his entire family there. And of course, the story if you've read it. It doesn't end very well for Sodom and Gomorrah later on. So,
yeah, Joe, I think you hit it right on the head there with the reputation going before them. It's always interesting when we look at sin, especially in our modern world, and how we try to understand it and how we try to teach it through modern theology and our modern church system. We say, well, all sins equal, and while that be true, we see verses like this where it says they were sinning exceedingly. So there's definitely like a limit, a level, an amount. There's something that's spoken there of, yes, we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We can read that verse and understand what that means. But, would God look at us, our world, our communities, our churches, and say, yes, we are sinners exceedingly, or we are just fallen men, who are fallen women? We've fallen short. And I think that's one of the thoughts that sometimes we don't really allow to mature often is, we kind of just want to say, oh, everybody's bad and everybody's broken and there's no hope. So, believe in God and hope that Jesus saves you when you die. Versus, something like this where it's saying, there is something to say about trying to be the right kind of person, looking at the lives of Noah, Abram, Isaac, all of these guys where, they lived a godly life, and you never hear phrases like sinning exceedingly or anything like that from any of those guys, but then you do from like the other camps. And I've always kind of wondered, is there kind of not a limit, but is there like a level where it's like, yeah, everybody's sinning, but my goodness, guy, you're putting yourself, like, you're elevating yourself in the nature of sin that more than what the natural man would. You are chasing after the sin, you are actively pursuing the sin versus just being a person who falls into sin. And
right.
That's a weird balance for us to work out in our modern world and our modern faith walk. But I think it's something that we should look at and address and be comfortable with, saying, I really am doing my best, though I'm fallen, versus I'm just out in the world and I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I think there comes a point where people would just basically, like, throw away all restraints, everything about them. They're just like, we're going to do this, and with no restraints whatsoever. And God's just not even an afterthought on any of these things. That's kind of where I feel like Sodom and Gomorrah had kind of headed to, that there's so much debauchery there, not just the sexual sin, but we learn later in Scripture, one of the biggest crimes that they committed, it actually got them destroyed, was that they weren't taking care of the widows and orphans. They weren't taking care of people on top of that, on top of the debauchery that was going on. And we see that later in Genesis when the two angels appear, and we know that what the men there in the town wanted to do with those two angels. And so we know that the sin was running rampant. And I can't help but think about our modern day Sodom and Gomorrah is Las Vegas. Not Las Vegas. It's Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Where it's Sin City. It's what happens
They labeled
there
it.
stays there.
Yeah.
And it's not a secret. If you were to say the one place in the United States of America that probably has the most debauchery, the most stuff going on, it's Las Vegas. And it's kind of our modern day. Everything goes, nothing's held back, and it's our modern day Sodom and Gomorrah right here in the United States.
Not only anything goes, but I mean, if you've ever been into places like Caesar's Palace, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's statues of all their gods and goddesses all over the place. It's pretty ridiculous. So something I was kind of interested in here is, it said Lot parted from him, back to verse 17, Lot parted from him and Lot dwelt in Sodom, and the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. In other words, it was like that when he got there, right? So why was Lot able to leave? Why was he not destroyed with everyone else? Why was Lot allowed to leave?
Why was he allowed to leave?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Abram, right?
Because Abram, it was a favor that he had with Jehovah. Because when the angel showed up, he's like, the two leave and the one is left behind, and the one says, I wonder if I should tell him what I'm about to do. And so when he does tell him, then of course Abram's like, he remembers that Lot is there. And, I think when he actually breaks it down to, he says, if you find, from 50, I think, to down to 10, if there's 10 righteous there, and I think he's trying to think in his mind, okay, he has his daughters, his son, he's trying to think of how much family is actually there. Will you spare this place for that if there was 10 righteous found? And so I think because of the favor that Abram had with Jehovah, that he granted that for Lot to pass, to come out of there with his family.
Okay, so it's more of a favor for Abram, and not not that he was found righteous.
I would say not. Me personally, I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of a toss up for me on either way on where that would go, or what's the right answer.
Yeah, I don't really know how to decipher that. I mean, I know they got down to the number of 10, right? But Lot and his family was the only ones saved out of this. It makes me question if he was found righteous as an individual that was found righteous, or was he righteous at all? Because if he really was righteous, would he stay there in the midst of all of this stuff, as evil as they were?
Mm-hmm.
Or would he find a way to get out?
Right. Well, I think when you read the story too in Genesis, the way that his family responds to the fact that when the angels come to him and say, hey, we're leveling the place. Okay, I'm paraphrasing, of course. We're going to level this place tomorrow,
Right.
And you and your family need to get out. When he tells his family this, they laugh. Like, oh, Dad, whatever. So It tells me that wherever he was, and of course, we're not judging Lot and where he was with Yahuwah, but it's obvious that he wasn't in a place of authority or wasn't in a place of leading his family correctly in the ways of Jehovah, because they were like, yeah, whatever, And so the fact that he allowed himself to be there, not only be there, but be in a place and position of authority, says that you were pretty much well committed. We were there to stay. We were locked in, we were very committed to where they were, and I think that's evident too when you see that they leave, because his wife was so connected to all that. She looked back, and it was very clear, do not look back. And his wife did look back. And it wasn't just merely that she looked back to see, I want to see the hell falling into destruction. I think she looked back yearning for what she was leaving. and that was the place that was in her heart. That's why she was turned to a pillar of salt.
Yeah, I just wanted to hash that out a little bit because, for anyone who's maybe speculating, what is the issue? Was Lot a righteous man that was found there, or whatever? For me, I lean towards it. This is a favor to Abraham, Abram, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
he's the
the
same
only
guy.
way I see it. Yeah, because he was. I mean, he was living there. He was in the middle of this stuff. That his family was.
Yeah,
What's the word I'm looking for? They were.
Well, his family was caught up in it as much as he was.
Right.
The lifestyle of that place and the debauchery and everything that's going on. So the thing that's interesting about Lot is the same as what all of us would sin. When we find ourselves in a place of sin, and you look back and at some point in your life you say, well, I never would have done that, or I never would put I would never do this or whatever. And then you find out that what happened, what I think with Lot was, it was enticing to him. So that's why I think they camped outside of it, kind of scope it out a little bit, kind of move a little bit closer to the fact now you're inside the gates, now you're rubbing shoulders, and now you're caught up in what's happening. And if you had talked to him before this, possibly, and said, hey, would you be a part of this, or would you ever subject your family to this? Would you ever blah, blah, blah? He may have then said, oh, of course not. That's horrible. The things that they're doing in there, I would never do. But It's like anything else, that when you start entertaining these thoughts, and these thoughts will then lead you to a place that you don't need to be at.
Yeah, so Kyle, I think that what you were saying about Lot, his whole demeanor about stuff, and same thing, Joe, where you were saying he was camping outside. I think that the reason that he was even able to be in this position, one, I think he had the family ties. I think there was a huge part of that where they kind of knew, and they grew up together, they traveled together in a sense, so they would have shared life and experience, and they would have known, hey, I serve the God of well, he's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're seeing Abraham now, so he's the God of me backwards. And but also I think that he had some moral compass left. When it says that the men appeared and they were all like, bring them out so we can have our way with them, type of thing. And he's like, no, 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 no. Now, did he make the right choice? No, but he had his moral compass about him. Like, I can't go full off the rails. I can't just let people ransack my house, take them my guests, treat them like crazy. I can't just stay here in the city, even though I heard the warnings. I mean, I'm sure other people heard it. I'm sure the word got around. Hey, this Abram guy said they're gonna blow the whole place up. We'll stay. We're fine. But they were like, they at least had the wherewithal to leave. So I think where where Lot and his family was at was they were probably intertwined with a lot of what was happening there, but they still maintained some semblance of moral compass where they were able to not just be all the way gone. And I think that's a big thing for us today, where we can have times where we've fallen away. We can have times where we've having weak times in our lives, but until you've full blown blasphemed the Holy Spirit and said, I'm just going to do what I want, I'm my own king and my own God, there's always room for you to come back. And God always leaves that avenue. He'll send you an angel, he'll send you Abram, whatever it takes. He'll send you the hellfire and brimstone. Hey, I'm dead serious. You got to get out of here. And if you're not listening or obeying, you're going to miss it.
So I know this isn't part of what we read here, but based off how this conversation is going, I really have to bring this up, and I think it supports what you just said there, Jonathan. So in this situation where Lot is, we have the idea that these angels were passing as men, right? And we have scripture that tells us that, be careful, you could be entertaining angels unaware, right? And in other words, you could be communicating with an angel and not even know it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the thing about Lot. Most people were seeing this as two men, but he recognized something about them to know what they were or who they were.
Right.
Exactly.
So he had at least enough wisdom to recognize what he was looking at or who he was looking at, that it was not just mortal men, right? These are messengers.
I'm really glad you brought up the point of Lot recognizing these two men, that they weren't just ordinary men. And it kind of goes to show you too that with sin, how it blinds our eyes, and no pun intended, I guess, because that's what happened to those guys who tried to take advantage of these two men, that they were blinded. But spiritually, how far were they just so far into their debauchery? Let me say that correctly, since for those who've been listening, I apologize for killing the King's language. So you won't see the part where they're telling me in between here that's going to be edited out that I'm saying the wrong word. But anyway, that's what I do. I'm sorry. But anyway, but on all seriousness, though, that their eyes were so blinded to who these men really were, and I agree with you that there was still something about Lot. I think that he's like, I recognize who these guys are, and by the way, that it was so important that when he sees them and they walk up to him, they're like, "Yeah, we're going to spend the night." He's like, "No, it's better if you leave." I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically like, he's probably going, "Oh my God, something's about to happen any moment. Now it's better if you just go." I'm like, no, we're coming to stay with you for tonight.
Right.
And again, and then when we back it up a little bit there to Abram, it says Abram was sitting outside of his tent, and the three men approached. There was something about them, and I agree with you that he's like, these aren't just three guys wandering through the desert. These men have been sent by Elohim, by Yahuwah. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think he's excited. He wants to kill the fattened calf. He wants to get the bread made. He wants them to stay, which is part of their custom, by the way, anyway, to do these things for guests and visitors. But I think that, again, Abram, being who he was, also completely recognized that these weren't just three sojourners going through the desert. So,
right.
Yeah, Kyle, if you can pull up right there at the end of 19, one of the really, really cool connections that I made, and I was trying to find it a minute ago, was why this wording sounded so familiar. So right there at the end of 19, it's talking about Abram going up to the place of where thou art dwelling, northward and southward and westward and eastward. I was like, when was the last time I heard that? Because that's a very interesting phraseology, especially in the fact that that's all four directions. It's everywhere. Or wherever you're standing, everything around here, that's going to be you. And then he goes on to tell them about the seed and how they're going to multiply like crazy. Well, where else do we hear that? We hear that with Moses. Whenever he's it's in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 27. It says, "Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift up your eyes westward and northward and southward and eastward, and look at it with your eyes, for you shall not go over this Jordan." So we're getting that same language of Moses didn't, he wasn't allowed to enter into the promised land, but he was able to see all of it. And, however that actually played out, whether he was given a vision of what it would have looked like, or he was given a futuristic view of the whole land and, the success of his people that he brought in. But that language is literally exactly the same. And it's kind of paralleling these two stories and showing that, not only is there that connection, but like how we talked about a few episodes ago about the prayer that Abram had and how similar it was to the Lord's Prayer that Jesus taught the disciples. We're seeing this same spirit and this same God flow through this whole story and throughout this whole narrative. And I love that it keeps that connection, and it makes it even that much more concrete and firm of, is the Bible true? Is Jubilees connecting with Scripture? Yes, 100%. There's no doubts, just because the Bible story hasn't changed one bit. And if anything, it backs itself up over and over and over again. So I just love that connection in this little portion here.
And I'm just asking this, but I'm kind of curious. I wonder, when he spoke to Moshe and when he's speaking to Abram, if it's roughly the same area. When he's saying, "Hey, look, north, south, east, and west, everything you see will be, is yours." So, I mean,
I'll throw it out there for your thoughts.
What's that?
I said that's why I was throwing it out there, because I was definitely thinking that the potential is there for sure. Because if he was too far west or too far east, it wouldn't make any sense. You say, "Oh, look to the west. Oh, there's nothing but water there, so this doesn't make any sense." So it would have had to have been somewhere where there was an option that they were at least in the same region, same area.
Yep. I like that idea of being shown in the vision form, and I know that that's a way to, he wasn't able to go in, but the Father also didn't have to show him, right? What he was missing out on. So it was, in a way, it was not just showing you what he's missing out on. So it wasn't a punishment necessarily in seeing it, even though it might have felt that way. It wasn't necessarily a punishment in making him see it. It was also a blessing. But if that's the case, was he seeing it what it would be when they got there and got everything established, or is he seeing it as what it will be when Yeshua returns?
You got what I was putting down there.
You put it down, and Kyle picked it right back up.
So here's my thought process. If he was shown what was going to be established from the Israelites there, that could be, I mean, that would be a kind of a, ooh, you got me right here. So like, I got to miss out on that. Ooh. But if he was shown the promise, it was, you don't get to go in there now, but let me show you what it's going to be when you do get to come in.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awesome thought. Very cool. I got a question. So what about this sand of the sea idea as far as the seed is concerned? That was a lot of S's. I shall make thy seed as the sand of the sea. You know, we read that in the normal the Bible scriptures also, right? So we have that idea of understanding. Though, and this is in verse 20, though a man may number the dust of the earth, which
Yeah, good luck.
right. Yeah. Yet thy seed shall not be numbered. I'm just curious what y'all's thoughts are on that. I mean, I know, you know, you can generalize this and say, yeah, it just means it's going to be a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, right? But is that really what it's saying, or is it saying something else that we're just not getting? Like, is this? I mean, if we just take it, if we take this as a literal thing, then I would say that we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years left before Yeshua returns. Because that's got to be a lot of people.
Right.
A lot of people for a long time.
Yeah, for me, just reading through it, for me, is as simple as it's an idiom or a descriptor of God's basically just telling him, say, hey, by the way, even if, though a man may, so he's saying may number the dust of the earth. So even if a man could number the dust of the earth, then what I think he's just explained to Abram is, by the way, going forward from here, now you got to remember, Abram doesn't have any child at all. So we haven't got to the part yet where God's promising him, his seed and all this stuff. And so you got to remember, like he's making this bold statement to Abram, who has no children yet, that Sarah's barren. They've been married for a minute, still haven't had a child yet. And then, of course, we get more of this information as we read through Genesis. So I think what the Father's trying to set him up ahead of time is saying, hey, by the way, that this is way bigger than what you think. And though you don't have any children yet, though you don't, your seed isn't here yet, this is way bigger than what you could ever imagine in your mind. Because he's showing them a landmass that's gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
If we take where Israel is now, those borders are actually a lot bigger. People don't realize that the borders of Israel actually spread out to the east and to the west and to the north and to the south. It's actually a much larger landmass than this little tiny sliver that we see now.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's getting a picture. He's getting to see now whether this is in a vision or if he's literally seeing the whole thing, whether he's seeing into the future, the New Jerusalem, or seeing all these different things. God's showing him something that's like mind blowing to begin with. By the way, anywhere that you can see this way, that way, front and back, that's yours. And by the way, on top of that, your descendants are going to be so numerous, man, you're not going to be able to count them. I think he's just trying to really help Abram to understand, like, you're where you are in life right now, that I've got some big things installed, and you're part of that plan. You're the pinnacle part. Whenever we name off the fathers, right? We go I believe in the God of who, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Abraham is always that first guy there because he's the patriarch. He is the guy. He is through his seed that everything else comes through. The 12 tribes, all of it comes through his lineage. So to me, that's as simple as that. Is God's just trying to really just relay to him how big this is going to be in the future, that you can't see all of it right now, but it is going to be there.
Okay, so your take is that God's just trying to let him know, not only are you going to have children, not only is your seed going to spread, but it's going to be more than you could ever imagine. So he's just he's just saying a lot, a lot, a lot.
Right. He's using terms that Abraham would understand. Everyone back then would understood what dust was, and they would understand what the sand of the sea is.
Yeah,
it's true. Hey, he said, even if they could count this, hey, brother, this is what your seed is going to be like in the future. So
I don't know why. I I like the idea that he's simply just implying that it's going to be a lot more than you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But something, I don't know. I just feel like there's more to it. I don't know why. I can't verbalize it. I can't express it properly, but I don't know. I feel like there's more to this. So with that said, guys, if you guys have any information
Absolutely.
on this particular thing, by all means, please put it down in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you guys think about that. And while you're at it, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe if you're not. All right, guys.
Well, I think for me, guys, in verse 21, what I'm seeing here is after he's told him these things and he said, "See with your eyes." Now it's like literally, now go walk it. He says, "Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and the breadth of it, and see it all. To thy seed shall I give it." And Abraham went to Hebron and dwelt there. And so I think not only is he giving him, he's telling him the vision, he's showing him the vision. Now he's like, "Hey, now I want you to walk it out. I want you to see that this is real, this is tangible. I'm not just pulling your leg here. This is truly for you and for your people to come."
Let me point out what's being noted over here on the right side. It says it's Genesis 13:16. It says, "So that if a man can number, then shall thy seed also be numbered." So this is insinuating that it's a if they are able to do this impossible thing, then
Mm-hmm.
they're able to number your seed.
But they're not going
Well,
to be able to.
right. Well, and
Right.
we just been reading through the book of Numbers, and it's them trying to number all the people, and that was already a feat and a task in and of itself, and that's just 600,000. That's somebody you can actually go and count with your finger. He's like,
Yeah.
imagine of all time. Imagine from year whatever
Okay.
this is till today.
Yeah. Can you imagine through the dispersia that how many of us, maybe us three guys right here, maybe we're somewhere way down the line, us being related all back to Abraham. I don't know. But can you imagine how many people are out there who have no clue of who their true lineage going all the way back to then is? And I don't know, maybe that's part of that whole seed also, not being able to be numbered. Because at some point it does keep going on and on and on and on,
Mm-hmm.
Man, I can't even guess how many jelly beans are in a jar, bro.
One of the things too, guys, I like to kind of point out too that with Abram not having a son and how it, for him, it says in verse 17, it says, "In the 4th year of this week, Lot parted from him, and Lot dwelt in Sodom, and the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly." And in that verse 18, it says, "And it grieved him in his heart that his brother's son had parted from him, for he had no children." So this is really showing to me the love that he had for Lot. And especially when we get further into the next part of the story, where and Genesis talks about this too, that when there's the great battle and all these kingdoms are fighting one another, and at this point Abram's about 75 years old, so we'll talk more about it when we get to that point. But this man's 75 years old, and he gets together, him and his servants and everybody else, and they go to war and they kick butt. 75 years old. And so I think that when he heard that Lot and his family were taken, this wasn't even a second thought. There wasn't like, man, I really didn't like him anyway, so I hope the best for him. What we see here is that Abram actually he really loved Lot as his son, and that and again here, of course, we read again in 18 that it grieved his heart. So that's where later in the story we see that he's captive, taken captive, him and his family. He's like, "Hey, I'm 75, but we're gonna rock and roll." We don't even know of Abram being this type of person until we get to this part of the story that he's actually willing to go to warfare over this. And of course, then we're gonna talk about this in the next episode, but about Melchizedek and kind of dive into that a little bit more. So, but I just wanted to bring that up that the love that he had for Lot, I really thought that was really cool. Was we don't get that from the Genesis story so much, but you really see that play out here. And then you see it play out when he goes to battle for him. Then you see it really play out again when he goes on behalf of Lot and his family to get them out of Sodom before it's all destroyed. So
Yeah, that is a big deal. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's a big thing for people that don't have children of their own. They tend to really take a liking to, if you will, for their family members, children, or even really good friends' children, you know. And
Absolutely.
they want to do for them and help them, and you know, I think that's awesome. Great point.
Yeah, and didn't we say previously that when Abram had set the house of idols on fire, that one of the brothers had died in the fire, and was Lot the offspring of the, and I can't, forgive me for not remembering the name, but the brother who did pass in the house of the idols, was that Lot's dad?
His brother Haran is the father of Lot, and he was the one that perished in the fire because he ran back in to save the idols.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and and I think that makes the point even more valid. You know, just seeing that, and I think we brought that up in one of our previous episodes, that Lot had some, I mean, not Lot, excuse me, Abram had some guilt there from, I'm sure his intention was not to have his brother die. His
Yeah.
intent was
Right.
to remove the evil and to purge the evil out. And the brother made a bad choice in trying to save the, gods. And now that the brother's passed, he kind of takes Lot under his wing, and there's a little bit of a guilt there of like, hey, this kid,
Yeah.
whatever age he was at the time, is without a father, and I'm without a son. This just kind of makes logical sense. And then in
Yep.
that time, we can see Abram. I'm always looking for that connection of where these larger than life, biblical characters are emulating the Father in heaven. Abraham has now since in a way adopted Lot, and aren't
Right.
we all adopted, right? We're all adopted into this kingdom, we're all adopted into the vine, we're all adopted, we're sons and heirs and priests and kings, and all these words that we kind of hear, that the Father brings us into his family. And whenever we look at it that way, Lot is showing the character again. It's always, that's one of my favorite things about all these stories, is you see the character of God through these men, and you see why they get to make the Bible story. Where some other guys, they might have done 100 awesome things, but they didn't show the character of God. And we're going to see as we watch Abram's life, he's going to do this over and over and over again, where he's getting ready to sacrifice his son, and all these other events where you're like, that is what the Father would have wanted. That's what the Father, if he was standing there in that position right then, he would have said, take this youngin, bring him underneath you, and teach him your ways. And hopefully, even though there was tragedy in his past, hopefully there's nothing but success and a relationship with the Father through the rest of his life. And I think that that's a huge story for us, that God wants us to leave our past lives and walk in, the newness of life, following him, just how Abraham's kind of setting that example for Lot. So yeah, it was just a really cool connection there for me. And I love that we're going to continue to see this as we move forward.
Amen.
Amen. So with that said, guys, man, what an episode. I know this one is a little short. However, we've got quite a bit to cover in our next episode. So we will see you next time for part 3 of chapter 13 in the Book of Jubilees. God bless.
Shalom.
Ciao.